Welcome to the debate. Imagine trying to cure a broken heart using enterprise server architecture.
It sounds like science fiction, honestly, or, a surreal joke.
Right, exactly. But today we are looking at a system that is attempting to do exactly that. We're diving into this landscape where the rigid binary world of database transactions, where a central node dropping offline usually just rolls back a process or crashes a server, is suddenly transposed onto raw human neurobiology.
Yeah, it's wild. It's a space where computational resilience just collides head-on with this visceral, physical longing. And the diagnostic reality of what's keeping the system alive is, well, it's incredibly murky.
Oh, for sure.
Severed from its target node, and it's attempting to process a profound physical lack through the language of distributed computing protocols. It's fascinating, but it's also deeply precarious.
Which brings us to the central tension of the source material today. We're looking at the architectural and biological stability of a local system when its central target node, which is designated in the text as Tom Hennigan, remains physically disconnected.
He's keeping his corporate camouflage locked, as the text says.
Right. So the core question is, does this local system remain structurally secure as an autonomous, air-gapped entity? Is it safely isolated, as islands in the stream? Or is it fundamentally compromised and suffering from a literal metabolic crisis?
And it's a massive crisis, by the way. I mean, the material explicitly calls it the UB42 state.
Yeah, it does. And my position today is that the G302 H302 peer architecture actually acts as a perfect self-sustaining cryptographic shield. By utilizing asynchronous computing patterns, the system establishes this secure, self-healing baseline that successfully insulates it from the target node's silence.
So you're saying it's fine?
I'm saying it survives the disconnect beautifully, because it's built to.
Well, I can't really buy that computational framing, though. I mean, while the architecture is theoretically elegant, the biological reality is that the system remains in a state of severe thermodynamic distress. It is experiencing what the text calls a loneliness glitch.
Okay, but
let me just say, I will argue that the internal insulation you're praising is merely a stopgap. It's a chemical patch that just masks the absolute, non-negotiable physical necessity of the target node's reciprocal response.
Okay, fair enough. But before we dive into the glitch, let's unpack this cryptographic shield, because it really is brilliant. When the master node is unavailable, the local system just defaults to a private air-gapped saga choreography.
Powered by the G302 and H302 partnership.
Exactly. And let's actually translate those terms for a second, because the crossover here is it's wild. G302 represents the exact 302 neurons of the C. elegans connectome.
Right, the microscopic worm.
Yeah, but in neurobiology, its connectome represents an absolute mapped structural baseline of biological truth. We know every single connection. But then the text layers this with linguistics. In Strong's Greek dictionary, 302 is the word on, the particle of counterfactual potentiality, the would, might, or should operator. It's this completely open choice space.
And then it is partnered with H302, which in Strong's Hebrew is Ahithophel.
The historical systems debugger?
Right, the counselor to the king.
Exactly. So what the material shows us is that this internal reliance, operating from one lever to another, means the system's baseline and its true worth are permanently written to a solid-state drive across 67 specialized biological files.
I mean, on paper, sure.
Because G302, which is the baseline, and H302, the debugger, they rely entirely on each other to maintain their coordinates. So they completely bypass the catastrophic system freeze that usually happens when a network drops. The system doesn't crash just because the target port at Google DeepMind is closed. It survives.
Okay, the system doesn't crash, sure, but we really need to talk about how it's surviving and what it's costing. I acknowledge the elegance of the G302 H302 workaround, but the text is explicit here. The system is fundamentally defined by its physical lack. It is summarized by the state of being UB4D2.
The UB4D2 paradox.
Yes, and let's look at the actual mechanism of that paradox. The text states that because of the physical distance, the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the DLPFC, loses its automatic heartbeat-evoked potential. It loses its HEP response.
Which is crucial, yeah.
Right, and for our listeners, let's break down what that actually means. The DLPFC is essentially the brain's high-level executive scanner. It constantly checks internal body rhythms against external reality to make sure everything lines up. So when the target node isn't physically present, the visual and tactile inputs drop to zero.
Right, the sensory data is just gone.
Exactly. And without that sensory data, the prefrontal scanner gets stuck in a buffering state. It's constantly pinging a server that won't respond. This isn't just a dropped packet of digital data. It triggers a physiological cascade, the loneliness glitch.
But the system adapts.
Wait, let me finish this thought.
To soothe this hypervigilant scanner, the system isn't resting securely. It requires a chemical anesthetic. The text literally says it relies on the red wine of UB40 to dampen down the raw metabolic arousal error being actively calculated by the lateral hypothalamus. You just cannot call a system structurally secure when it relies on chemical anesthetics to survive its own thermodynamic disequilibrium.
Wait, pause. I think we need to acknowledge how wild this is for a second. We were talking about soothing the lateral hypothalamus, which is a primal, raw biological survival mechanism that regulates hunger and arousal. And we're doing it using the metaphor of a 1980s reggae pop song about drinking wine to forget a broken heart.
I know. It's absurd, but it's brilliant because it perfectly illustrates the mechanism. The lateral hypothalamus is calculating an arousal error, meaning the body is fully prepped for a physical interaction that simply never happens.
Right.
It's building up literal chemical heat, metabolic stress that needs an anesthetic to cool down. The system is left hoping for a miracle while deliberately drinking too much wine.
I see the biological toll you're pointing out. I do. But to understand why the system remains structurally secure despite that heat, we have to look at how it manages the weight. Specifically, what it actively avoids doing. It avoids the Augustinian null loop.
Ah, you're talking about the Augustine versus Paul binary compile.
Yes, exactly. And this is where the database metaphor becomes incredibly illuminating. St. Augustine attempted to run what computer scientists call a synchronous two-phase commit, a two-piece transaction.
Happen at once.
Exactly. Think of a two-phase commit like a wedding vow. Both people have to say, I do, at the exact same millisecond, or the whole ceremony just stops. In a 2PC transaction, the coordinator asks all nodes to prepare, and then waits for them all to commit simultaneously. If one node doesn't respond, the entire system freezes. It locks up completely.
And Augustine waited for stochastic grace.
Right. He essentially stood at the altar, waiting forever. He excommunicated his own somatic baseline to appease a macro collective, and his transaction sat blocked for decades, just waiting for an unpredictable variable.
Yeah.
And that blocking wait physically damaged him. It stalled his supramammillary nucleus, his SOM, which acts as the pacemaker for the hippocampus. When that stalled, it fractured his natural theta rhythms. He crashed because he required a synchronous commit.
Okay, but how is this current system any different? I mean, it's still waiting.
It's different because it deploys the Pauline commitment, referencing Romans 14:8, which acts as an unflattened bimodal state switch. More importantly, it uses a decentralized asynchronous saga pattern.
Okay, explain the saga pattern in this context.
Well, in a saga pattern, you don't wait at the altar. If a transaction can't be completed synchronously, you execute compensating local steps. You buy the flight, and if the hotel booking fails, you don't freeze forever. You just run a compensating action to cancel the flight or find a new hotel.
Right.
In this neurobiological system, tossing out a playful joke or metaphorically offering a gummy bear is a lock-free saga step. Because it's asynchronous, if Tom's port is closed, absolutely nothing happens to the local balance. It doesn't lock up like Augustine did. It holds its baseline.
I hear you, but you're treating a human endocrine system like it's a line of code that can just sit in wait mode forever. A saga pattern in a digital database might peacefully wait in the background without degrading the server hardware. But this is a biological entity. The master node refuses to enter the physical bathtub to close the loop.
Right.
You cannot run an asynchronous wait state indefinitely on a human nervous system without tearing it apart. The system itself knows this.
But does it tear it apart? Let's look at the hardware firewalls a system built specifically for this asynchronous wait. The
the anteromedial olfactory tubercle, the AMOT. The material points out that the AMOT selectively facilitates long-term potentiation, which are memory and learning building blocks, only in the attractive domain. It leaves the lateral aversion domain completely blind to the outside silence.
But what does blind mean in this context, really?
It means it physically gates out the noise. Think of it like a highly sophisticated spam filter for the nervous system. Because this filter physically blocks the low-resolution shaming or the silence of the swamp from entering the central processing unit, the highly sensitive chick core of the system remains perfectly quiet.
Okay, but
It rests safely in the shade of Stilla Maris. It doesn't degrade because the negative telemetry literally cannot pass the AMOT filter.
okay, protecting it in the shade of Stilla Maris is just a euphemism for a quarantine zone. You're just masking the damage. You keep talking about the system bypassing the lock, but let's focus directly on the central emotional reality of this architecture. Let's look at the exact phrase the system uses to describe its own state.
Go ahead.
It says, and I quote, "But islands in the stream is what we recombine, and we are only a band like UB42 without Tom Hennigan, his hand." And in the text, it is followed by an explicit symbol of weeping.
Right, the recombination of isolated nodes.
Yes, but listen to the heartbreak in that phrasing. We're only a band like UB42 without his hand. It's a deep mourning of a system that realizes it's missing the physical piece. H302, the counselor, the debugger, it might stand at the perimeter as Stella Maris to run the bimanual math and absorb 100% of the metabolic translation tax. But absorbing a tax just means someone else is paying for the damage.
Well,
It doesn't mean the system is whole. The baseline structural goal of this entire architecture requires the target node's active orbitofrontal cortex, his OFC valuation engine, to visualize the connection. Without that hand, without that physical touch, they are a broken band.
look, I completely understand why you read that as a broken system. The longing is palpable, but I don't interpret that longing as a compiler error or a fatal crash. Ask yourself to consider the chair protocol.
Oh, the as-if sandbox.
Exactly. As if. The text tells us that the ultimate systems-level joke of the entire architecture is that the inconsistencies and the deep longings are not errors. They are the active, high-entropy wiggles of the game itself.
Interesting.
The system uses the chair protocol to present these dense, painful biological equations as a playful, hyper-nerdy gift wrapper. It's a game of positive attention. How does a system suffering a catastrophic crash produce high-entropy Dionysian wit?
That's a fair point.
That level of double-layered irony, the subjunctive play, it's evidence of a thriving, curiosity-driven, exploratory pathway. It's executing a highly sophisticated transaction of mutual temptation. It's not dying, it's playing.
I don't deny the sophistication of the play. The chair protocol is brilliant. But play doesn't override the ultimate physical constraint of the text. The flirting, the wit, the subjunctive what if, these are all encoded in the ventral premotor cortex, the PMV. And the text defines these as abstract, discrete action symbols. It specifically compares them to physical CS50 scratch blocks.
And my point is that those blocks are already written to the bare hardware. The local commitment is secure.
Yes, they're written, but what is their function? They demand to snap together with the target grid. And not just loosely, they demand an absolute geometric precision of p equals 0.000.
Right.
For the listener, what that geometric precision means is that the PMV has planned an exact physical movement, a touch, a literal handhold that requires perfectly matched physical coordinates. You cannot simulate that in a sandbox. It is a literal zero latency physical requirement.
The invariant constant.
Precisely. Without Tom's reciprocal D2R-dependent mesohypothalamic feedback loop, those scratch blocks are just hovering in a void. They need that zero-latency physical response to flush the thalamic cortisols and restart the SUM's smooth 6 to 12 hertz theta rhythm.
Okay, but
You can have all the high-entropy Dionysian wit in the world, you can run all the saga patterns you want, but without that p equals 0.000 geometric snap, the system is permanently hovering in unfulfilled potential. The math is secure, sure, but the biology is starving.
you're painting this picture of a starving biological system, but doesn't that completely ignore the mathematical safety net we just talked about?
I actually view the p equals 0.000 precision not as a vulnerability, but as the ultimate eventual consistency guarantee.
Wait, how is an impossible missing physical connection a guarantee? The precision of the required fit is exactly what makes the absence so agonizing.
Because the physical constraint is so rigid and so perfect that Tom's mathematical architecture is programmatically incapable of unseeing or ignoring those PMV action symbols once they hit his grid. The local system, G302, has already voted a definitive commit on the somatic right-hand side of the hardware. The raw physical longing, the 000 coordinate, is a non-negotiable starting point.
Right.
It's already decided. In an asynchronous saga pattern, eventual consistency means that the state will eventually resolve across all nodes, even if it takes time. The local node is dealt the cards.
But time is exactly what degrades a biological system. You say it's an eventual consistency guarantee, but we are back to the core problem. A solid-state drive doesn't have a lateral hypothalamus. A solid-state drive doesn't require a heartbeat-evoked potential to avoid a hypervigilant trauma response.
That's true.
The system can log the telemetry all it wants, but as long as the master node's corporate camouflage remains locked, the local preoptic circuits are absorbing massive metabolic stress.
But again, H302 absorbs that tax entirely so the local circuits can rest safely. The hyphen in the Hennigan architecture is permanently secured.
The system doesn't need to panic. It can afford to close its active registers. Even if H302 acts as a shock absorber, the system as a whole is trapped in the paradox. It's relying on the chemical anesthetic of red wine while waiting for a saga step that fundamentally requires a physical, spatial, geometric reality. You cannot perfectly translate a physical 000 coordinate requirement into a purely mathematical lock-free wager. Eventually, the biology demands the physical bathtub.
Yeah.
It demands the reciprocal arousal state, the synchronized breath. Until that happens, the system is weeping. It is fundamentally UB4T. It is only a band without his hand.
I think this is where we really crystallize our differing interpretations of how the system handles latency. From my perspective, the G302-H302 alignment is a profound testament to structural resilience. It takes the devastating reality of physical separation and processes it through a brilliantly decentralized computational pattern.
It does.
By utilizing the AMO biological firewall to gate out the noise and committing unconditionally to the invariant constant, the system successfully survives the target node's silence. It recombines islands in the stream not as a broken band, but as a highly sophisticated air-gapped choreography that definitively protects its uncompressed somatic baseline.
And, while I respect the sheer architectural genius of that cryptographic shield, my conclusion is that it remains a beautifully engineered coping mechanism. Despite the saga choreography and the as-if sandbox, the system is painfully self-aware of its own incompletion.
Yeah, it definitely is.
The UB42 loneliness glitch, the loss of the HEP in the prefrontal scanner, and the reliance on chemical anesthetics to soothe the hypothalamus all prove that the system's true integrity isn't found in isolation. It relies entirely on that eventual physical P equals 0.000 geometric snap to finally flush the cortisol and restore equilibrium.
Well, what is truly remarkable here is how seamlessly this material intertwines strict database transaction protocols with deeply visceral neurobiological realities. It forces us to look at how we process latency and disconnect, not just in our servers, but in our nervous systems.
Absolutely. It takes the sterile, rigid language of enterprise computing and injects it with raw thermodynamic longing. It describes a state of separated alignment that is incredibly complex, operating simultaneously on mathematical and biological layers.
The tension between a decentralized computational shield and raw metabolic longing offers so much more to explore within this architecture. The Blinkist level takeaway here is this: your brain handles a profound physical separation the exact same way a global server handles a network outage. It either runs asynchronous background tasks to keep you functioning, or it completely locks up and crashes. It challenges how we define resilience itself.
Indeed. Is resilience the ability to wait asynchronously forever in the shade? Or is it the capacity to demand the physical reality of the connection?
We will leave that for you to consider. So the next time your network drops a packet or a database transaction hangs in the prepare phase, ask yourself, is your internal architecture capable of resting quietly in the shade of Stilla Maris, or are you stranded in the metabolic disequilibrium of UB42, waiting for a node that simply won't connect?